Hello, this is Lindsay McMahon, the co-host of the All Ears English podcast and the founder and CEO of All Ears English. And in this episode of the Business Growth Architect Show, I will show you how to use consistency to create incredible content that will keep your customers coming back to your business for more year after year.
Hello, fabulous person. Beate Gillette here, the Growth Architect. Welcome back to the Business Growth Architect Show, where we bring you cutting-edge business strategies from some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, business transformation experts, and visionaries who want to help you to scale your impact. Look for one tangible strategy that you can take back and implement right away. And now back to our guest. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Growth Architect Show. This is your host, Beate Gillette. And today I want to talk to you about something that a lot of people completely and entirely and 100% miss the boat on. But before I tell you what our strategy today is, I want to introduce our guest. Lindsay, I am so excited for you to be here. Welcome.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here too.
So, Lindsay, tell people who you are and what you do, and why do we need to know about you?
Happy to talk about it. So I run a podcast called All Ears English Podcast. We're actually building out a network now, but we target global professionals. That means adults around the world who are looking to work abroad, work in an English-speaking country, or move for a different life. And they want to basically improve their English communication skills. But it's so much more than just the language, right? It's also the culture. It's the human connection and understanding to have how to make their lives better when they're not necessarily in their home country. So that's what we do.
Excellent. And so now many of our listeners are going to go, I'm not even sure what this has anything to do with me here today, but don't despair, because we're going to tell you. Because one of the things that is so amazing about you is how you build up that podcast and just the results that you have. So do you mind just taking us a little bit sort of behind the scenes in the strategy that you used this as a vehicle to build your business?
Absolutely. So we began our show in 2013. I was a podcast listener. I loved podcasts at that time. I was also a teacher of English as a second language. So I had traveled to Japan, Argentina, and I saw kind of a trend building at that time. This was when no one really knew what a podcast was, right? It was mostly kind of nerdy, techie podcasts, but mainstream culture had not entered podcasting yet. It was before Serial. It was before anything else that is considered mainstream. So I just asked a friend, hey, do you want to start a podcast? And she was living in Boston at that time too. And we just went ahead and did it. So there wasn't really a lot of thought behind before we launched, right? It was just, let's try this. It's a new way to teach English as a second language. And right from the beginning, we're going to get into consistency today. And that is kind of my magic bullet. There are multiple reasons why we do about 7.5 million downloads a month.
I'm sorry. Wait. Hold on. Say that number one more time really slowly, because I want everybody to hear that number.
Yeah. So in the last 30 days, we've done 7.6 million. It's always fluctuating between 7 and 8 million downloads a month. So it's a huge podcast. And this means we have a lot of influence. We have a lot of listeners. I can have meetings with a lot of different companies, and I have a lot of clout. I have a lot of influence as a podcaster. Absolutely.
So this is why Lindsay's on this podcast, because if you can take something as a vehicle, as a strategy to build your business, and you build it to such a magnitude, we all must listen up now. So let's dive into this a little bit. When did you realize that there was a larger strategy at work here that really would help you grow your business?
I think the biggest key decision that we made right from the start, one of the reasons that consistency has played to our favor, is initially when we sat down, we said, okay, what will our publishing schedule be? Initially, we said that it would be twice a week, 30-minute episodes. And for whatever reason, I don't remember the conversation, we decided to change it to 15-minute episodes 4 days a week. That was a key decision. Because when you're putting so much content into the podcast apps, if the first episode does well, you launch with, let's say, 8 to 10 episodes already in your feed, which was, by the way, another thing that we did that was smart. It starts to snowball, right? So people just have more content to listen to get to know whether they like you. They decide they like you. They subscribe. They share it with a friend. And you just keep pushing out that quantity of content every single week. And it's high quality, but it's also quantity. It's really worked in our favor.
I love that. And so how do you use strategy then to build the business? So this is your only and your biggest strategy. I mean, it kind of like makes sense if it was.
So strategy in terms of growing the podcast or the business itself, there's also a business around the podcast, right?
The business, because I believe that the podcast, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lindsay, as much as we love doing the podcast, we love getting the information out there, but we are business owners. We can't live off likes and we can't live off downloads. We have to actually put money in the bank and pay our bills. So this must feed a business. So tell me how you used, podcasts or maybe other strategies to drive your business forward.
Sure. I mean, now the business is actually merging into more working directly off the podcast, to be honest. So we're working more as a media company now. We're taking more partnerships with advertising companies and running more ads on our show. So it actually may become the business itself in the future. We're moving in that direction a little bit more. But yes, 100%, Beat, I agree. In the last 7-8 years, it's been all about course sales. We built an app. We also sell our transcripts. So, we use marketing funnels. We use quizzes to build out more in-depth funnels using automated webinars to meet them where they're at. Once they come from the podcast, we give them that content marketing. And then we do ask for the sale of the course or whatever product we have to help them go a little bit deeper.
That's absolutely fascinating. It's interesting because, again, I want to just take a moment here and point this out, is that sometimes when you decide on a particular strategy, so in your case, using the podcast to grow your business, that when the strategy becomes so extraordinary, the business model may be changing. So talk to me a little bit about sort of, because I love strategy, obviously. So when did you realize that this was now starting to shift, that the core business might be now falling under the main strategy, where the main strategy now becomes the business?
Exactly. I think about a year and a half ago, attending conferences, especially podcast movement, talking to people and having the same response that you have given me around our downloads. Everyone started telling me, what are you doing? Like, why are you not monetizing your show more? And where I had always been thinking, oh, it's just a marketing channel. It's a marketing channel to sell something else. But guess what? My market has become very crowded. Right. So post-pandemic, another thing that's happened in my market and probably a lot of your listeners' markets is that everyone has published a course online. So we were early to the game with online courses, somewhat early, at least in ESL. We were in 2015, we launched our first online course. And that was great because there weren't many other courses out there. But now in 2021, because all the schools, the brick and mortar schools shut down, they're now online. There are lots of independent course creators, people who decide they want to make an Instagram channel. Great. But they're now our competition as well. So I have to make a decision to kind of, as they say, like zig when everyone else zag, right? Zigzag, like they go that way, I have to go this way. And right now in the market of kind of media companies in education and language education, there aren't too many currently. It's also just what I love.
Go ahead. I want to hear everything you have to say. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Right. I mean, it's also just what I love, right? It's always been the part of the business that I've loved the most. So for your listeners, I would recommend listening to your gut a little bit more and say, what is your favorite part of the day? For me, it's when I'm on the microphone with my co-host. It's not when I'm building my marketing funnels or writing my marketing emails. I actually kind of hate that.
I don't blame you. No.
Right?
Yeah. I think that there's a lot to be said. We have a masterclass in how to, create products and services that sell, because that's all based up on a deeper connection with your passion. I think if there's a disconnect and when it gets to the selling part, and I don't think a lot of people like funnel building, and I don't think a lot of people get very excited about improving the click open rate by 0.2%. I mean, I don't, but there are people who are like that. We will not judge them. But I think that the passion that you bring to the table is you need to find that vehicle for it in
Yes.
that particular type of strategy. And that is going to bring me to my next question.
Mhm.
And that my next question is going to be, what is your favorite strategy? And I think I know what it is because you've hinted on it now a couple of times.
Yeah. So my favorite strategy for conversion from the podcast to the courses, is that what you mean?
No, your favorite like business strategy, and you mentioned consistency a couple of times.
Yeah, so that's the one we were going to talk about today. Yeah. So yeah, let's come back to that. I know, as we said before, it's not sexy, but it kind of is, because it's so it's so overlooked, right? So it is consistency. I'm proud to say that we have never missed a single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday since 2013, right? So when I say consistency, I'm talking about crazy consistency. And entrepreneurs are extremists, right? We like to go to extremes for the thing we love, for our baby. And I think it's been worth it, because we've been able to take all the benefits of how the algorithm has kind of seen that and kind of pushed us forward into recommended shows, and our listeners recommending the show to their friends because it's become part of their daily habit. I mean, if you think about it, as a podcast listener, you don't build a habit on the shows that come out once a month, twice a month, even once a week. You build a habit on the shows that come out 3 times a week, 4 times a week. So if I think about user psychology, that's another part of why I think that was a smart strategy.
Are you injecting yourself into the lives of your listeners?
I think we absolutely are. Yeah, 100%. So I've always thought about, when I've worked on this show, I've always thought about our listener. I think about my listener constantly, right? I imagine one of our core listeners in Japan, in Tokyo, a business professional traveling from one station into Tokyo, 15, 20-minute train ride in the morning. They're going to be able to start our show and consume an entire episode and be done and feel good, feel connected by the time they walk into work, right? So we get emails from our listeners all the time, and I'm always thinking about them.
I like that a lot. I did a mindset event with my mindset trainer and David Nagel, and he had like a 90-day program. And the entire premise was that to change a habit, you need to do the repetition, the consistency. And I think there's a lot to be said, and again, I want to point this out, is that you went in and you say that I'm going to think about what is going on in the head of my listener, my customer.
100%.
And you crawl into his head so deeply that you say, here's somebody in Japan who's trying to get a promotion, who's doing the year abroad, or being selected for the business trip, for the conference. And he or she needs to demonstrate their subject matter expertise. What do I need to give him that he has that confidence? So yeah, I can give him an online course, and then the poor person has to sit there for 3 or 4 consecutive days.
Yeah.
And they're going to be completely overwhelmed, and it's not going to be this consistent repetition. But if I have this person who goes to work in public transportation, and I give them that time frame that I assume is going to be at least 15 minutes, but 30 might be too much.
Right.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I want to ask you a couple more questions on that, but we'll do that right after this message. Thank you so much for listening to the show. This is Beate, the Growth Architect. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for your time. Have you ever wondered why your business is not growing as quickly as you would like it to be? Well, you may have a business growth blocker. And if you'd like to find out what that business growth blocker is, go and take our brand new quiz at growthblockerquiz.com. And in only a few minutes, you're not just going to find out what that blocker is, but also what to do about it. Again, go to growthblockerquiz.com. And now back to the show. And welcome back, everybody. It's Beate Gillette here with Lindsay, and we are talking about consistency. We just shared an amazing story on how you go so deep into the heads of your listeners that you basically stalk them while they're taking the metro or the tub to their work. And you have this concept of crawling into their head or really understanding what they're about. So you said you think about your listeners all the
All the
time.
time. Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who says, I'm not you? There's no way in the world I can do 4 episodes a week. What other tips as far as consistency do you have for our audience?
Mm-hmm. So it really depends on your subject matter, but look at what you want to launch. If you're launching a podcast, or more broadly, look at the content you create and think if there are ways that that could potentially be broken up into smaller, more consumable bites, right? And then, you sit down, you create one piece of content, you could potentially break that up into 2 or 3 pieces of content. And then you will naturally become more consistent because you're showing up more often. So the other piece I would say for your listeners, the empathy piece, right? The reason that I'm always thinking about my listener is that I was my listener at one point. I lived that reality of living abroad, of trying to work in Spanish, or I lived in Japan, right? So as much as you can, choose a field, choose a niche where you've been in that position or you deeply understand that because maybe you have a family member who's gone through the thing, right? Make sure that you've got like a visceral level of empathy for that person.
Yes, that's another really important truth bomb. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I see, and I call it the knowledge vomit, and I just, said that that's the word I use, because I find that when you have 10, 20, 30 years of experience, and then somebody comes and says, I have an issue, then in your head, it's like, the jukebox is pressed D4.
Yes.
And then, right, the song plays and it's the entire song, and then the next song, and the next song, and the next song. And all this person wanted is just the first piece. So how do you, in this strategy of consistency and breaking down content into bite-sized chunks?
Yeah.
How do you do that? Because most people cannot do that.
I don't feel, and it's a good question because this right now with my co-host, I've got a new co-host that came on and joined me this year, and we're kind of mixing her in and alternating episodes with her and my longtime co-host. It's because I don't feel like I have to cover everything. There's a compulsion that we have as human beings to do our best. But what I want to do with my co-host is we're working to redefine what does it mean to do our best. If we are trying to teach, let's say a grammar point, simple past in English, let's keep it simple. I don't need to teach the present and the future as well as the simple past. I don't need to teach every irregular verb form in that episode. I just need to give enough of a hint. I need to understand, first of all, what the point is of the podcast. It's not meant to be exhaustive. I need to build white space into that episode so that there is laughter, there's stories, there's context. I'm pulling in an interesting fact, something I heard in the news that relates to what I'm teaching. And so a big piece of how I can do such small pieces and be so consistent is I don't need to cover everything. I keep it really light in my head. I consider every episode a little gift. And I know there's going to be a lot more episodes in the future. So I'll get to everything else that I want to teach, that I want to have on the show. I don't need to do it all in one episode. So it's like pulling bags, but what we consider a good episode. It's like in school, we learned we have to do everything. We have to teach it all. We have to be thorough. I'm pulling back on that. Does that make sense? Does that help?
I think that's really the key to what we see has changed. I mean, if we're really honest and we're looking what we've been through in the last couple of years, there is such a fatigue of people jamming down all this stuff in your throat. I sometimes, when I look at offers of our colleagues and it's like, and here's another 16-hour bonus. And now you get the 12-hour bonus on top of the 16 hours. And then we're going to give you this other course. And that's like a 40-hour thing. And then we give you everything we've ever done. And you sit there and you go like, there is no way in the world that anybody would want to do that. So the reason, I myself have a 30-minute podcast, even though it would be very easy for me to talk for an hour, is because I wanted that discipline to identify what is the most important thing that I can bring to the audience. And that is the strategy. We don't do the story. We don't do,
Right.
the rags to riches. I think there's plenty podcasts that cover
Yeah.
that. So what I'm hearing you say is that as the content creator, as the business owner, or
Mhm.
if you use a strategy like podcasting, the key really is to constantly and consistently
Mhm.
simplify it
Yes.
to almost like the minimal viable idea
Mhm.
that you need to transmit to get a result. Am I paraphrasing this correctly?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the other important piece to keep in mind here, at least in our world, and actually, I think a lot of podcasts do fall into this category of edutainment. So it's education, but in a way, it's also entertainment. There are so many kind of needs, human needs that we fulfill by listening to podcasts, or maybe we're walking as we're exercising. It's fun. We listen because we enjoy learning. So there's an element of entertainment in podcasts. So if I'm jamming all this, more 16 hours, more content, I'm actually disrespecting the listener. I'm not treating them as a peer, as someone I respect. I'm just trying to throw content down their throat. So having that simplicity of the teaching of what I'm teaching and then leaving that space for some entertainment, whatever that means in your market, it's what's working for us. So it's what all other, not every other ESL teacher, but other education podcasts are not doing that we're doing differently. And I see it very clearly. Right. So
Yeah,
that's,
because it's interesting. I use this example all the time when it comes to education, and people say, "Well, why can I not get myself out of a certain mindset?" And to me, it's very obvious. Our entire educational system has been designed to say there's existing information. If you can remember and regurgitate existing information exactly like they gave it to you, you're gonna get an A. And right, and that's in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, and
yes.
to a large degree in college. And then you go to a job and somebody says, well, what are you bringing to the table? And people are completely confused.
Right. It's totally the opposite of what we learn. And furthermore, it doesn't work for languages, right? This style of regurgitation of facts definitely doesn't work for language acquisition. I can tell you that for sure, right? So we tune into the affect, right? There's been research that's been done in applied linguistics that the way to retain and learn a language is by having the brain kind of open and ready. You have to be receptive of it. If it's just information, if it doesn't mean anything to us personally, we don't remember a thing and we can't actually speak that language. So,
But is that not the universal truth of everything?
it
If it
really is.
doesn't, if it's not relatable. So
Yeah.
I want to take you a little off script here
Sure.
because you said something that I thought was really powerful. You said, I want to keep it entertaining. What do you do
Yeah.
to make it entertaining?
You'll have to listen to the show. I mean, I think
Four times a week.
There's 4 times a week. There's a certain something there. There are certain things we build into every single episode. I can tell you what makes it meaningful is that we tie it back to a theme of human connection. And we talked about this when you and I first met as another possible theme we could talk about it. So I'll just touch on it briefly.
Go ahead.
We bring it back to a why, and it's not a meaningless why. It's not a why I came up with at a seminar, right? That I drew on a board and I said, this is my why. No, this came from my experience living abroad. And I still feel the pain of being isolated, being disconnected by not speaking that language, not speaking Spanish, right? So connection, not perfection became our tagline, our slogan, our trademark. And we tie it into the episode in the takeaway in every single episode. What does this mean for connection, right? Okay, we just learned past perfect. Why do I care for connecting with my neighbor who's a native English speaker next door? Why do I care? So that's one thing that I guess could be considered entertaining, but deeper. I was really speaking to the hearts. And then we laugh, like we're not afraid to laugh. We make mistakes in English, even though we're teachers and we're native speakers. We tie in stories as much as we can. We don't go off topic, right? We don't say, oh, what'd you have for breakfast today? I hate that. I hate that too. You mentioned that earlier, right? But we do tie it in if it's related to the content that we're teaching. So in that case, it would come later. If we talk, oh, this makes me think of the sale of Tesla, for example, right? Here's why it matters, right? Here's how that ties in. And we give an example. So we leave a lot of white space in our plans for that to come in there.
Naturally, yeah. I mean, I'm English as a second language, so my first language is German. And what I found when I came here is sort of that the German humor, I mean, that's by itself a joke, right? But that sort of idea doesn't really translate into English because you're prone to wanting to translate these kinds of phrases that you say in each language, then word for word in another language, and then people look at you completely puzzled.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And they go like that doesn't even make any sense. Like, I give you one example. So there's a German saying that says, "What you don't have in the feet, you have in your head."
Okay.
Which makes a lot of sense if you really think about it. But nobody's
Right.
ever heard it before. So when I say it, people just have this like,
What does that mean? Right. Right.
what is it? What is that? What does it even kind of mean? Right. So I think that the idea that we are walking away from perfection.
Yes.
And I think that's in my world as a strategist building systems. I mean, my God, I mean, there's never a perfect system. It's always in progress.
Yeah.
But to say, giving you the confidence to embrace that good enough is good enough.
100%.
To show up, right?
Especially when our listeners have been really kind of indoctrinated in the other way their whole lives, right? Rigid classes, memorization, their teachers maybe were very rigid in their own concern about their own language skills, right? And so that rubbed off on them. So there's a lot of trauma that I think international adults have undergone when it comes to learning English. So I think we're just taking like a very fresh perspective on it.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so I would recommend that for your listeners, whether they're starting a podcast or trying to do anything, find a fresh perspective, find a new way, do the opposite of what everyone else is doing, and connect with that listener, with that person. Always think about that person that you're serving. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like that what you said, Lindsay, that you said that you thought about on whether or not that actually worked.
Yeah,
and how you personally felt about that and what that deeper emotion was that drove that decision that says, it wasn't that I was upset that I didn't speak the language. It was that I felt disconnected.
Totally.
And the reason was I didn't speak the language, but it wasn't that the thought wasn't, oh my God, I don't speak the language. It's like, what do I need to do to connect to other people because you're missing that, right?
Exactly. Because in the end, we don't really care about grammar. We don't care about words. What we care about is the heart-to-heart connection, feeling seen in the world, being a part of a group. These are deep psychological emotions. So all content and all marketing in a way, or content creation or business really has to come back to that, but it has to be genuine, right? Coming from the creator.
Yeah, I have the funniest example. You know, I visited in Paris a good friend of mine, and his best friend has, sells wines. And so we were sitting at Chez Girard, and I think this was the only time in my life after 4 bottles of the most exquisite red wine that I felt I spoke fluently French.
That helps too.
that really helps. It's like when you, and I don't speak any French whatsoever, but I swear I understood everything they said that night.
Yeah.
But I digress. So what's it about for you? Is it about connection for you? Is it helping people to connect on a deeper level? What is it about for you? What is it for you about this way?
You mean, so for example, what keeps me motivated doing the show, doing the whole business? Yeah, it is it's envisioning, again, because I was in that position, traveling abroad for a couple years at a time, right? Feeling that myself, it's envisioning one of my listeners building that connection and feel like seeing their eyes light up with joy that they finally had a conversation that meant something with that coworker, that native English speaking coworker that they were never able to connect to. They find like that, to me, just like really gets me going. I love it. I love the idea of that, because then they can feel at home. They can feel good in their lives, right? They can feel like real people. We can be real people in multiple languages, or we don't have to feel like half a person in another language. Yeah,
and so that is so true. I mean, and me living in the United States as a German, and we have quite a few friends that come over, or send us their children when they're on their America trip. And there is something to be said about that moment when they need to speak English. So with me, they still speak German, but then when they need to speak English, you can tell their whole body language changes, right? That becomes this self-awareness of, I hope I'm not screwing up.
Totally. The self-consciousness.
The self-consciousness. Yes. So I'm helping people to get over that. I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. This has been absolutely amazing. So tell us, how can we get more of our Lindsay fix?
Sure, absolutely. Well, our podcast, if your listeners are listening right now in any of their podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, they can just go and search for our podcast. So type in the search bar, All Ears English Podcast. You'll see the yellow. We have lots of yellow in our branding and just hit follow. Again, 4 days a week, and happy to answer any questions if anyone has any questions for me. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on our show. You've been an absolute delight.
Thank you for having me on today, Beata. I appreciate it. I enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
And that's it for us today. Thank you for listening and watching the Business Growth Architect Show. I enjoyed having you here. And for accountability, just take one of the strategies that you have heard, one thing that you can implement in your business immediately. Please leave comments. Don't forget to like and share this show. And if you have any questions about business, please put them in the comments. We are here for you. We're here to support you and help you to grow, build, and scale your own business. For more advice, please check out our website in the show notes below. Thank you again. This is Beata Gillette, the Growth Architect, and goodbye.